好，那我们现在把时间交给 Cary。
嗨，大家好我用英文讲好了，因为我的 Chinese not good enough. Okay, so I'm gonna end up speaking a bunch of Chinglish. So thank you for the introduction, Sonia. I'm actually not a deacon this year. I'm on what do they call it? Mandatory sabbatical. That right? So I think
Oh,
every like I forget how many 7 years or something
seven.
you have to take a sabbatical. So so they kicked me out this year. So but I'm still already getting phone calls from the other Andy Chen. I have a feeling he wants to ask me about next year. So we'll see how long I can avoid him, right? So today when I heard about coming to talk, I thought, well, it's not like I'm talking to a bunch of freshmen in college, right? And so it's a much more diverse group of people, and I thought, boy, what do I want to talk about? And I thought I would maybe share some stories about what I've learned, right? And tell it in the form of like stories, right? And I've had a number of jobs in my career, and maybe some of these stories will be funny, and maybe some of it is not, and maybe you can relate to something and maybe you can't. But the point I wanted to really share today is that as a Christian, um you guys can see me, right? My video, right? Good.
Mm-hmm.
As a Christian, this is one of my favorite scriptures. And in fact, it's the favorite scripture that I have, right? It's from First Timothy about watch your life and doctrine closely, persevere in them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. Now, there's no First Timothy 4:17 that says, except if you are at work, or at work you don't have to watch your life and doctrine closely, right? There's no like verse 15 or verse 17 that talks about that. And so I think as a Christian in today's world, we live in a world that's not always perfect to live your life as a Christian. And if we want to be able to evangelize and share our faith with other people, we can't just stay among ourselves. We have to think about the people around us, and we have to, like Jesus did, go out among others, right? And so I wanted to share some of the lessons that I've I guess I would say lessons that I've learned, in some ways the hard ways or the easy way, right? So growing up, I grew up in a family where my dad owned Chinese restaurants. So what does that mean? That means I wash dishes. I can peel shrimp like you would not believe how fast I can peel shrimp. I can cut like carrots, and I know how to make like a lot of dishes, right? So that explains my belly. But anyway, that's a whole separate story. I know what it means to work hard, right? I used to come home from school and I would deliver newspapers, and then I would go in the restaurant and I have to wash dishes, and then just in time for dinner rush. And I was the kid in the back that, when you go to the bathroom at that Chinese restaurant, there's like some kid there. That was me, right? So um I was used to hard work. And so, even through college, right? A lot of my friends, they had families that paid for their way. I had to pay for my own way through college. It took me 5 years because I had to work my way through college and pay for it myself, right? And one of the first jobs I landed outside of after school, after college, was at a company that it was very shortly became purchased by Microsoft. So I kind of started my career at Microsoft in Redmond. And Microsoft it was a very hard working company. In fact, one of the things I remember is that they have these things called a death march, where if your manager hang a sleeping bag on the door, that means you cannot go home until that sleeping bag is gone. And there would be periods when I would live in my office for like 2 weeks,
Oh,
and go downstairs and take a shower at the gym, and you can go home maybe an hour to pick up some clothes, but that's it. And so that was the working environment, and it was expected, and everybody worked hard and everybody played hard. And I traveled tremendously, right? I traveled all over the world. I was kind of a fixer of sorts, right? They needed, and so I traveled to South America and Asia. I visited every country in South America, from like all the tiny little countries to like the big countries. And it was, I learned a lot. And I also worked really hard, and I learned a lot, but it became to a point where I felt like they were taking advantage of me, right? Because the way our work was split up, it was split up by regions that were primarily based on language. So there's a South America, North America, South America predominantly Spanish, North America English, Asia Mandarin, right? And Europe was predominantly English. And so instead of hiring people that spoke those languages, they hired me and asked me to cover the whole planet. And so it started as, wow, you speak Spanish, you speak Mandarin, you speak English, so we can use you everywhere. But it turned into a situation where I was traveling probably 20 or even 30 days a month, right? I wasn't home.
What?
Like my landlord actually at one point thought I died and had the police come in and break down the door because my car, like there were spider webs, growing into my car from the ground. She thought I died, right? And I wasn't there. Of course, I was like in Brazil or something. And in the end, one of the things I realized is that no matter what your age is, no matter where you're working, you have to know what your worth is, right? And so, how do you define your worth? Is it based on how much money you have? Is it based on how much, like a title or respect at work, right? Or is it based on how are you treated, right? Do you want others to treat you like you would want to be treated, right? Do you treat others like you want others to treat you? And so, what would you do if you worked for a company that took you for granted? And all of this kind of hit me this one day as I was in a hotel in Houston, and Houston was a major hub for me going to South America. And I had this thing that what I would do is before I go to bed, I leave the TV on to the local news. And so when I wake up, I know what country I'm in because I would lose I would be like, oh, where am I? Oh, I'm in Colombia. Oh, where am I? Oh, okay, I'm in Venezuela. Oh, okay, good. Because I would wake up in the morning, don't know where I am, and I panic. And that day I woke up, I forgot to turn on the TV the night before, and I had a panic attack. I thought I was having a heart attack. And later I call my boss and I say, listen, I know I'm supposed to go to Mexico, but I'm just gonna come home. Right? It was like a Friday, right? I'm just gonna come home. I'm not feeling good. I spoke to a doctor, and he said, um, I need you in the office. When you fly home, can you come to the office? Right? And I just thought to myself, wow, this guy just wants me to work. He doesn't really care about me. And the following week, I quit. And I realized, you know what? You can pay me really well and give me all the stock options, but if I don't have my health, if mentally I'm going crazy, right? Imagine trying to find a girlfriend like that. I mean, shoot. Right. It was like trying to date was impossible, right? I just didn't even have a chance to meet anybody. So it was tough, right? And so after that I went to a different company. I went to a company called a small startup software company, right? And while I was there, I realized something that as a small company, you wear many hats, right? I was head of their information technology group. And the first day of work, literally the first day of work, it was a Friday actually, I walked in and the room that had all of our servers, there was a flood in there. Like there was probably about what is that, like 5-6 inches of water on the floor. And I said, why isn't anybody taking care of this? And the IT, there's only a few people in the IT group, right? There was like 4 people, and they all looked at me and said, well, that's not my job. That's the janitor's job. And I thought to myself, what did I just walk into? What kind of company would, if you had a flood in your office and it's sensitive computer equipment and you're in the computer, that's your responsibility. Shouldn't you go take care of that? And I realized that in that company, in that team, everybody just kind of did their own thing. They really didn't care about anybody else. They just did their thing and went home. And because of that, they weren't really working together, right? And so, I went in there and one of the things I realized was, there's this Chinese guy, there's this Irish guy, there's this German guy, and then there was like this Vietnamese intern. And I thought to myself, man, this is like United Colors of Benetton, right? And and I said, okay, you know what? The one thing that brings guys together is food, right? So every day when I would say, hey, let's go to lunch. I'm treating, and I would have each of the people. They would choose a place to go eat lunch, and so we'd eat like Vietnamese food, and we go get like German sausages, and then the Irish just keeps wanting to take us to a pub, and then of course, I take them to eat dim sum and make them eat chicken feet, right? And so, but we became a team, and I realized something. You need to be very considerate of who you're working with, right? Both people that are above you, people that are in your team, and people that are side peers of you, right? And so, it's very like, because these people are the folks that they provide advice to you, they provide help for you, some of them can be a mentor to you, right? If you have a if you're doing something and somebody sees you doing something wrong, they may be the person that would challenge you and help and save you, right? And so there's a Bible scripture that talks about iron sharpening iron, right? But in the case of this company, it was just kind of just everybody just did their own thing. There was no iron sharpening iron. And so we became really good friends, and the team really got brought together. And I learned so much at that company, that thinking about your coworkers is also very, very important. And eventually that company came up on some financial hard times. And one day I was called to the boardroom with the board of directors, and they said, you've got to fire 2 people, right? Because we can't afford them. And I'm like, well, we're definitely not getting rid of the intern because we don't pay him. So so he's safe, right? But we had to fire 2 people. And I thought to myself, geez, one of them just had twins, right? And the other guy knows kind of going through some health issues, and he needs that insurance. And I thought, that's terrible. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm a single guy. I live at home, right? So I made a deal with that board. I said, if you promise you don't lay off anybody in that group for the next 2 years, I will quit, and I will not file for unemployment. And you can take my salary and pay those two and come out even, and you'll actually have two. You'll actually you'll lose one head, but instead of losing two. And one of those guys I had already been grooming as my future replacement, and so he could take over the team. And so I left the company, and of course, none of those guys really knew what happened, but we all stayed good friends, right? And I wonder to this day, I don't know if any of them know. They just thought it was kind of weird that Cary all of a sudden quit. so I don't know that any of them know, but it's I don't think it was something that, if we weren't as well a team working together, where we relied on each other so much, where we covered for each other, where, hey, you're not feeling good today, let me cover for you, go home, right? If we weren't doing that, I don't know that I would have felt like I was willing to really help these folks in that way, right? And so that's why I think that in a professional environment, yes, we're there to work, but we really need to consider each other, because without each other, what who could you rely on, right? And so the good news is, I think God kind of the good news there is that God, I think, opened some doors, right? The proverbial door closed and another door opened, right? And so I decided to take some risks. So I spent a year learning about starting up a business on my own, right? I found 2 business partners who are actually really close to friends of mine from church. And they were also unemployed. So the 3 of us spent a year and developed a business plan. And we launched a company called Seattle Home Theater. And the company would build high-end custom home theaters for, I guess, people with a lot of money, right? Like, for example, a typical room would cost from $5 to $10 million for one room, right? And so it's super high end, right? Our customers were people like Mark Cuban. You know who he is, right? He's the guy from what's that show? But Shark Tank, right? We built out his home theater room. We 50 Cent, right? And so we built out his Florida mansion, right? And we we did we built smaller home theater systems for the entire cast of Friends.
Oh.
That was the gift NBC gave them when the show ended, in fact.
Oh.
Right. And so because they were so grateful, they came to us and said, I want you to go hook up, David Schwimmer and Jennifer Aniston and the entire crew, right? And so we worked with each one of them and helped them build out a home theater in their home. And so it was an incredible opportunity, right? Because it started from nothing and we started doing something huge. And um, the problem was that 2008 happened. And if any of you remember, there was a big financial downturn in 2008 that related to the housing crisis, right? And what happens when people with tens of millions of dollars of disposable income, when the economy goes bad, they tighten up, right? And so within a period of like 3 months, we lost a ton of orders, right? And so the company basically hit zero, and the three of us, I remember we were sitting at a chicken wing store up in Simi Valley, and we said we gotta cancel, we gotta get out of the company. So we ended up selling that company to another firm that was based out of Switzerland, and that's what kind of ended up bringing me down to California, because their headquarters is down here. So because originally I was up in Seattle, right? And during this time I realized that I took a huge risk, right? We made good money, but we lost probably even more. And even though when we sold our company, the three of us principals, we made out pretty well, afterwards, the company put us up in a temporary housing to, that was the condition. They would give us a place to live for about 6 months after we went down there. And we actually lived across the street from Chris Tucker, Chris Tucker, right?
Oh yeah.
From and I remember one day I was out getting the mail, and he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, we need more Asians in this neighborhood. This neighborhood's too white." And
Gotcha.
but anyway, that's another story sometime. But the point is that after that ended, I was technically homeless. I had no address, right? So for probably 6 months, I'm not ashamed. I lived out of my car. I slept on the beach in Venice. I crashed on. I had a good friend who traveled a lot for business, so he just, whenever he left, he just gave me his key, and I stayed at his house. 24-hour fitness was very helpful. You go in there and take a shower and all that. And I had money. I could have found a place to live, but I said to myself, you know what? If I don't have income coming in, I'm not gonna, I looked at living in a home as a luxury at that point, right? And so I kind of went, what do they call it, couch surfing for about 6 months. And then and the point of all this is that the risks that you take, sometimes you fail, right? And it's okay to fail. And in fact, to me, it's only called a failure if you did not learn anything from it, right? When you fail and you say to yourself, I learned something from it, here's how I'm going to benefit from it in the future, that's not a failure. That means you're one step closer to success. I know that sounds like some saying people probably have up on their wall somewhere, but I really believe that. And so there was a tremendous amount of gain and lost there, and it ended up being pretty low for me, right? I remember like living, and my parents were just like, come home, and I was so ashamed. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to go home, right? My mom and dad were like, "Your bedroom's here. We're here. You're okay." And they're like, "I know you're broke." I'm not broke. I got plenty of money. I just,
Mm.
if I don't have an income, I'm not gonna splurge, right? And except for the car, because I was living in it, so I needed to have a car. But the point is that it's okay to take a risk, and it's okay to fail. And it all kind of came to a head when one day I got a phone call from a company called Fox, right? Fox Studios, right? And so I went there, and I took a fairly interesting job. I basically oversaw the technology operations for film, the studios, the cable television network, and the sports, Fox Sports, and eventually what interactive media, which is like the online properties, right? And so internet, and it's pretty cool, right? I worked with, American Idol. I worked with Hell's Kitchen. In fact, if you guys ever go back and look at old episodes, you might see me on season 3. I'm just saying, right? So, um, and got to get some walk-on roles for shows, and great. Went to every Super Bowl, World Series, like NASCAR, like every like playoff Final Four game ever. Like if you're a sports fan, it's like, you know but here's the thing about that industry. um a lot of offers from vendors to fly me to Europe and play golf. A lot of offers for $1,000 lunches. Just vendors showing up and say, hey, I got a gift for you in the back of my car. A lot of that kind of stuff. And it really caused me to struggle. And in fact, I've always just thought, you know what, that's other people. As long as I could just say no and keep it away from me, I'm fine here. And then one day, the CIO of the company called me and asked me to go to his office. And he said, hey, Cary, I know you have a $40 million contract. I need you to give it to this company. And I thought to myself, it doesn't I know that company. That company is a small, tiny firm. No way they could take on this 40 million contract. And then I later found out the owner of that company, guess what, was the neighbor of the CIO. And I went back to him and said, I don't feel good about this. I don't think we should do it this way. I think they should be part of consideration among everybody else. And if they earn the business, then hallelujah, it's theirs. And the CIO said, you need to give them the project or it's not going to end well for you. And so went home for the weekend, and one of the toughest weekend. Have you ever gone for like 72 hours without sleeping? That's what I did. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was so dehydrated, like my lips were white, and I just kept feeling like I was going to pass out. And I thought about what's my moral compass, right? What guides me, what I do in my life, in my days. And of course I went back to my faith. I went to the Bible. I prayed, right? I thought about it. I prayed. I went to people that I felt like were mentors to me spiritually, and I talked to them, and went back on Monday and quit. And by Friday had a new job lined up, right? The interesting thing is that they didn't expect me to quit, so they actually begged me to stay. And I told them I can't stay in an environment like this, but I will be independent paid consultant for you to help you transition some of my existing duties, but I will have nothing to do with that project. And so it was kind of interesting because I like charged them a lot of money as independent consultants. It was really funny. But interestingly enough, Disney later bought them, and this whole issue came up, and that CIO was escorted off the studio lot. And in fact, he was they were potentially looking at criminal charges against him, and I had to go in and give a deposition. And I told the truth, nothing but the truth. And I don't know what happened to him, but he's definitely not at Disney right now. And I feel like, God was there for me, and he put the right people in my mind in front of me. And at my most dire time, I felt like, went back to my faith and I did the right thing. And that's one of the toughest things right now, right? Working in a world that's not perfect for Christians, is that sometimes you're challenged to not do the right thing, and sometimes you're tempted. I'm telling you, if somebody says to you, hey, Wendy, I'm going to take you to a place and you're going to have a sushi meal that is going to blow your mind. It's $2,500 a person. Aren't you at least curious? You know what I'm saying? Tell me, no anybody on the phone. Well, aren't you going to be like, I've had good sushi, but $2,500 sushi? Like, what's going on? Like, aren't you at least curious? Like, and that's the thing. That's the way the world works, right? It's going to get you in a little bit at a time, right? And next thing you know, you're on that jet flying to, flying to England to go play golf. And then it just keeps rolling from there. And in fact, there was a gentleman at Fox who was fired because of that. He had made some promises to Dell, the computer company, and the Dell sales guy just pulled out all the stops, basically tried to buy the business, and he didn't give him the business. And Dell filed an official complaint, and the guy was fired. Right. So there's always going to be a challenge. There's always going to be a time for you to think about doing the right thing. And so that was one of the lessons that I learned at Fox. And I ended up going to a company called Capital Group Companies, which is in Irvine. And that's what brought me down here, right? I was living out there I actually lived in Beverly Hills, right? Had a 90210 zip code. It was kind of cool, and and I thought I could totally commute from like West LA to Irvine, no problem. What is that like? I could learn I could learn my Japanese, maybe pick up a language, books on CD, whatever, right? So like I think that happened for like a month, and then I literally just that's it. moved down here, and I couldn't stand the commute. It was terrible. But interestingly enough, like Capital Group was a very different type of company, right? Not only was it the way their culture is, but for me, it was a big career change because I went from information technology to what's called strategic sourcing, right? So I took a huge step back. I was a fairly senior executive at Fox, and I went back down to a essentially an individual contributor. I had nobody reporting to me, right? And so, why did I do that? Because I wanted to change my direction of my career. I felt like, at that time I was dating somebody that I liked, and now we're married, right? And she was getting ready to come to the U.S., and I'm thinking about popping the question, and I thought to myself, what kind of life are we going to have if I'm just traveling all the time and just having these kind of struggles all the time, right? How's that going to impact my wife and maybe my future family, And so doing the right thing meant taking a huge step back, right? And that was a lesson that I learned from previously, which is it's okay to fail as long as you learn from it, right? It's okay to take a step back. I didn't look at it as a failure. I looked at it as a step back so I can go in a different direction. And so now at Capital Group, I do what's called strategic sourcing work, which is, I help them source certain technologies and products for them to operate their business. And I get to do one of the things I love, which is like 讨价还价. So I love doing that, right? In fact, I've been told by my in-laws that if I go back to Taiwan, I'm no longer allowed to negotiate at the night market. So apparently I was very embarrassing to them because they see like this American guy and they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get him, and then I just start negotiating, and they're just like, why why are you trying to negotiate my bala? Just buy it. But I get to do today what I love to do, which is negotiate and work with other people's money, right? And so, but the thing is that I felt like this company immediately attracted me was because all the things I learned in previous years, it really became it helped me hone and figure out what I like and what fits me, right? And so the thing is too is that I look around the room. You guys aren't like I feel like I'm probably the oldest person here, right? So just so you know, I'm very close to 50. Okay, very close. Okay, like you guys probably don't see that because I shaved today. If I didn't shave today, you guys would be like, yeah, he looks it. So I purposely shaved for you guys today. But the thing is, there's always somebody smarter than you. There's always somebody who knows more than you. There's always somebody who went to more school than you. There's always somebody who has more experience than you. How do you compete in a space like that, right? Maybe you're right now in that place where you're the person in the room that's the smartest, that has the most experience. Maybe you're the person in the room that has the most talent. Do you think that's going to continue to be like that always? No. The only way to deal with that is to learn and seek knowledge, right? So when I landed at Capital Group, I really had that reflection. And so I try to every year focus on something professionally to learn, right? And so whether it's, learning some skills that I've never previously done, or whether like right now I'm working on my CFA certification, right? And whatever it is, I'm just right working on it, right? And so it's important to never stop learning, right? Because the reality is the only perfect job is no job. So until you're there, really be thinking about developing yourself. Okay, so kind of bringing this thing home here, right? So I talked about kind of these five things today, right? The knowing your worth, consider your coworkers, calculating risk, do the right thing, seeking knowledge. Um, these are all things that you have control over. There's nobody out there that can prevent you from doing that. Think about that. Nobody out there can prevent you from doing that. You have full control over it. You can make your own decision. And what I'm really talking about here is what they call the growth mindset, right? For those of you who have kids, that's a really popular topic, which is helping your kids grow mentally, how to deal with failure, how to be a not give up and continue to move forward in every aspect of their life. I bought a book for my son. He just when one of the things he got as seventh birthday, I bought him a book about a growth mindset, and it's a journal. And it's a journal that asks him to regularly reflect whenever he feels like it. Maybe it's weekly, daily, but basically the book wants you to ask, where are you? What are you doing right now? Where do you want to go? And how do you want to get there? Right? And so those are, once again, things that nobody else can control for you. Those are things that you keep in your mind. And so the important thing that we're talking about here is that it's really a self-reflection and looking into yourself that will really become how you will map out your future and through your career. And if you continue to maintain your if you continue to maintain the centering of your life focused on God, right? If you continue to think about where you're going to get your moral compass from, right? And continue to reflect on yourself, just like how as you grow and grow spiritually, you're constantly thinking about how do you refine your character, how do you refine yourself so that you can grow spiritually. You can do the same thing from a career perspective. And so I'll end with this First Timothy 4:16 again, which is, it's all about yourself, watching your life and your own doctrine, right? And I think that's why that's one of the things we need to do, because once again, we're not in a world that is just isolated, just Christians, right? We're out among a world that's not always the best for us. And so that's how my perspective is, that I think as long as we focus on things we have control over, about these five things, I think it will help you in terms of thinking about career and growth. And I feel like this is something that I've learned over my 30 odd years working professionally. So 刚刚好, just in time. And that's all I had today. So I don't know, are we supposed to do like questions or something, Sonia? I'm not sure.
Yeah. 现在可以问问题，如果有人要
有
问。
问题啊？哦，有什么？
对啊，你有时间吗？
Yeah, 我可以啊，孩子已经都睡觉了, so this is party time for me, man.
Yeah, party.
The kids are asleep. They didn't come bother me, so it's good times. Salary negotiation, yeah. I did something when I was my first job out of school. I'll talk about salary negotiating a little bit. This company was offering me. You got to remember, this was like the 90s, okay? So I don't know if some of you maybe not even. I know you were there, right? 90s, but first job out of school, I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. So I went to this company that was a interview and salary negotiation prep firm. and I paid them some money, and they spent a couple of weeks tutoring me on how to interview and how to negotiate salary. And I felt like it made a huge impact because it ended up, I ended up with a much higher salary on that first job than ever. And so, when we get to salary, it's always interesting, right? Because that first question they ask you is, what do you want? Right? Right? That's the first question they ask. But that's like the worst question to answer, because what if you really love the job, love the company, love the location, right? Would you be willing maybe to take a little bit of a pay cut to get the job? Maybe. What if the job is not exactly perfect, but they paid really well? Okay, you might be willing to take that too. So the reason companies ask, I think, for salary, and I've probably hired hundreds of people in my career, right? And worked with HR of all different size companies. Here's what it comes down to when the HR person asks, or whoever it is asks you that question. They want to know if they should eliminate you from consideration. That's really what they want, right? And so when it comes down to that, it's you got to get past that first. It's like, look, you're interviewing me just like I'm interviewing you. If I like your company, I would be willing to consider whatever salary you offer me. If I don't like your company, you could offer me anything. I might not take it. And so, just like any negotiation, in this case, salary, you go high, they go low, and sometimes it meets in the middle. There's a lot of nuance there. And I thought I saw Lee pop on for a second, right? Like I remember him and I talked a lot about salary negotiations, and I think if you work in a corporate environment and you understand how budgeting works, right? If you get a job and they offer you $80,000, right? I can assure you that's not how much they planned in their budget to pay you $80,000, right? Most likely, it's quite a bit above that. In fact, it's probably $100,000. That's just the way budgeting works, right? And so, and especially in a larger company. And so, if you get a salary, like I recently worked with, there was another brother in our church, and he got a job and he was negotiating salary, and it was a similar situation. I told him, I said, you know what? Nobody budgets like $76,500. Nobody budgets that. That's not how budgeting works. Anybody who works in finance, right? It doesn't work like that. So I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure here's what they budget. Round it up to the next, figure. And guess what? He pushed back and he got that. Right. And so you have to understand kind of the why before you try to, and this is kind of core when you talk about negotiation in general. And I could talk about negotiation forever, right? Because that's what I do and I love talking about it, right? So buying a car, how to like really make those car dealerships struggle, So, but when any kind of negotiation, you got to understand the why, what's driving them, right? They want to hire you. They've already made a decision that they want you. They've already invested time, maybe doing some background checks, calling your references. All those people you interviewed at their company spent time talking to you, and then they debriefed and met, and emails back and forth, and HR people involved, right? And then all culminated in a letter with a number on there. Do you think they're going to let you walk away for a little bit of money? No, they're not going to. And I can tell you right now, from the hiring manager's perspective, they'd rather just give you more to have you here versus having to go back to square one and start all over, right? And so it goes back to know your worth, right? And the reason I say that is because when you know your worth, you have some humility about you, right? What you're not going to do is you're not going to take a job that's an entry level and you go in there and you say, I want $200,000 a year, right? Brain surgeons don't get paid like that out of school, right? And so you got to know what's reasonable. So if you're going to negotiate on your salary, you never just say, well, I'm going to need about $10,000 more. That's not how it works. You got to put together a case. Why are you worth $10,000 more? Right? So that's the key. Before you even get to that salary point, during your interview, you need to be thinking about the salary. You need to be thinking about what value am I adding to this company that they haven't thought about? Because that becomes levers for you to pull later on when you're talking about your salary. If you haven't considered any of those, and you're sitting there with a HR person in front of you trying to get an answer, you're not going to have anything to reason with them as to why they should pay you more, other than the fact that you just want it, and that's not fair, right? So so that's kind of what I'll say about salary negotiations. I mean, we can talk about that long time, but that's just kind of some philosophically what I think. So.
哎，Cary，我看那我就先问一个小问题啊，就是from 你刚刚说的，就是 added value。那I think 就是 do you have some sort of example that for the added value that you can promote yourself? I mean, where to start, when you are preparing for interview and when you're negotiating salary is. Because I think for myself, most of the time, 就是 what company says 我就会最后就被拉着走。That's so that's just something. But just any value that we can start to prepare for ourselves, just to add it for yourself.
So I'll answer that question in a very interesting way, which is, imagine you're trying to hire somebody to work for you in a company. Let's say you're the person making the decision, right? And you think they're going to negotiate. So your first offer to them is on the lower side. It's not unreasonable. It's not a low ball, but it's a lower side. And then that person immediately says yes. What do you think of that person's character?
You mean what they're thinking?
What do you think of that person who just takes that first number out the gate? They
go in person.
Maybe they're very like pushover. Maybe that person has a very low worth in themselves. Like, everybody knows you're supposed to negotiate, right? And so even if you say, let me think about it, get back to you, and you make them wait 4 days, and you come back and you say yes, that's fine, right? My perspective is, if you've done your homework through your interview process, see, people think interview is all about you trying to get the job and convince the person talking to you that you're the best fit. I go into an interview and I in my mind, I think I can already do the job, or else you wouldn't have me sitting here. You have to convince me that I should come work for you. I turn the tables immediately. And in fact, I had a gentleman. You guys heard of a company called Coupang, based in Korea? They're like they're kind of like the Amazon of Asia, I think. They just went public a few weeks ago. Anyway, there's this guy wants me to go and work for there. I'm not going to go work for there, but the more I tell him no, the more he wants to talk to me. I'm like, I'm not going to pick up and move to Korea. What's wrong with you? But it's all about how you set the tone, right? So when you're even in your salary, in your interviews, you should be looking for, like, one of the common interview questions is like, what's working well in your company? What's not working well? Tell me about it, right? Like, if there's a hiring manager and you're interviewing somebody on that team, you must ask that person, what's driving this hiring manager crazy? What's keeping him or her awake at night? If they could have everything, what do they want, right? You need to understand that, because later when you're negotiating salaries, you need to be talking about, hey, I know these are big challenges for you. Let me tell you how I'm going to solve it. And guess what? That's going to cost you, right? And so that's why you need to be doing homework during the interview. If you don't do that, going into the negotiation, you're not really negotiating. You're kind of, I call it begging. You're kind of like, look, do me a favor, give me a little bit more, right? And and that will only take you so far before it becomes unreasonable. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the same, by the way, the same goes for if you're working somewhere already and you want to make more money, right? I've had people come up to me before and say, oh, my wife just lost her job. I'm going to need a raise. Cary, can you give me a raise? Right? As much as I care about that person, like, I will buy you lunch every day so your wife doesn't have to pack you lunch. I will do all of that, but I can't give you a raise. If everybody came to me with their personal problems because they need more money, that's not really a way to run a business, right? Right? Hey, love is free, everything else is cost, right? And so even when you have a current job and you want to go in and ask for more money, well, you got to think about why should you get more money? Just because you've been at the company and you deserve it, that may not fly anymore, right? In 1950s, just based on how long you've been at a company, the tenure, you'll just get raises every year, right? It's not 1950 anymore. Now, if you're not demonstrating value, not just value in your current role, but value beyond your current role, there's no reason for them to promote you or to pay you more money. So you've got to demonstrate that. Yeah. You guys very interested about salary, huh?
And my question is still about the promotion. So when if I'm ready and worth a better value, can I just walk into my boss office to talk about the promotion directly, or, or they?
That's a great question, right? Because different companies have different cultures, right? So for example, I've worked at places where um, you could just go in and kind of just lay the demand down, right? And I've also worked at places where they if you did that, people would just you get kicked out of the office, right? And so my personal approach is that I try to have some empathy to think about what the other person's thinking. Imagine you're sitting in your office, it's Friday afternoon, you're thinking about going home early, and then so and so walks in and says, "Cary, I need to talk to you. Close the door." And I'm like, "What's going on?" "Hey, Cary, I feel like I've been working really hard and adding a lot of value. So, what do you think? Can I get more money? Give me a promotion?" Right? Um, it's kind of a shock to that person, right? So the way you do it is you slowly turn up the ask, right? Maybe a few months earlier you start talking to them about, hey, how am I doing? Is there anything I could be doing better? Give me some feedback on my performance, right? Hey, and then whatever the feedback they give you, you work on it and you change it and you improve on it, right? Hey, I know you gave me this work. I want to take on more. I want to take on more responsibility. I want to learn more. What can I do? What should I do? Can you give me something? Can I shadow you? Go to some meetings, right? And of course, inevitably there would be a question that may come as why. It's like, hey, I just want you to know I'm ambitious. I want to grow here, right? And so you see what that does is that you start preparing that person's mind that this person wants something here, right? And this goes back to knowing your worth, right? And so and so one day maybe it's a few months have gone by, maybe it took you a year, maybe you sit down with your manager and you say, remember all those things you told me that I should work on? Do you think that I've successfully addressed those? Yes. And all the additional work I've done to kind of go above and beyond. Yes. Hey, um, how do you think the company can recognize me for that? Are there other opportunities that for me to move up in the organization, right? So instead of saying, give me this, you put the question on them. What do you think you could do for me? You see what I'm saying? It's actually a very key tactic when you're negotiating. Instead of demanding something, you put the question on the other person, right? When I bought a car recently, instead of going in there and say, here's what I'm going to pay for this car, I went in there and I said, look, here's what I'm paying for my old car. Boy, I sure love to pay the same for this new car. What do you think you could do to help me? Right? So through that, I took a car where I took a $40,000 car. I took a $40,000 car and I got a $70,000 car for about the price of the $40,000 car. So, but the key is putting the question on the other person, right? It's like, what can you do? What do you think you can do? Or there's another tactic. Is it really hard for you to do something for me here? Right? The point is trying to get the person to mentally say yes. when they say yes in their mind, even if it's something that's kind of silly, right? It's like, that's why I was saying earlier, it's like you ask them, hey, all the feedback you gave me, do you think I improved? Yes. Hey, remember all those times and I asked you if you needed more help and I helped you? Was that helpful? Yes. You see what's going on there? You got their mind thinking about yes, because next question or 3 questions later is, hey, do you think there's something you could do to help me here in terms of, a promotion or something that's more than what I'm doing now? Guess what they're already thinking in their mind before you say the whole sentence? Yes. And that is a very key negotiation. That's why when you're like at the night market negotiating, you don't go walking right in and you're like, 这个袋子太贵了，我只给你100块. You don't do that. Right? You say, 这个袋子有没有可不可以有没有这个颜色？yes 有啊有啊有啊。有没有这个拉链在左边在右边可不可以？有啊有啊有啊。You see what's going on? 他已经都习惯 saying 有， and then finally you're like, hey, 我口袋只有70块，你觉得这个袋子可以卖给我70块吗？他已经都在想 yes. Right? So that's one of the keys to yes. It's very subtle and it's kind of funny, but it really, really works.
Even though my boss is much more smarter than me.
Well, the thing is, somebody who's smarter than you doesn't mean that you can't ask them to help you with something.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, Emma, you could lead with that. Hey, boss, you're way smarter than me. Is there something you can think of that can help me? What would you just do there, right?
Yes.
How can they say no to that? If they say no, it means 1, maybe I'm not smarter than you, and 2, no, I don't want to help you, right? And so you put them in a position. I almost assure you they're going to say yes to that. And so not that they for sure is going to give you a promotion or a raise, but they've at least said to you yes. And so that opens up that more conversation, right? Now, if you follow up with them a couple weeks, a month later, you have something to build on. You see what I'm saying? So anyway, any other question, thoughts? Oh wait, I just realized there's like more people.
我想问一个问题，可是好像有一点难马上做到。就是如果说我现在要 interview 一个人，我有没有办法在很快的时间内可以看出我该不该用他？因为大家都是很会讲，他可能做了很多的准备，然后回答的也是，就是可能像你刚刚说的那些方式。可是因为我现在变成我要 interview， 我要不要 hire 这个人？所以我要破解说他是不是在故意让我 hire 他这样子。
对，像interestingly enough, right? I'm hiring 2 people right now, and people are very savvy with interviewing. And when you're interviewing over internet, you don't get the benefit of watching their entire body, how they react. So you just look at the face. For all I know, there's somebody sitting across the table telling them what to say. Right? How do you know that? You really don't know, right? And also, so when you ask questions, are you going to be like, so how do you feel about stealing? What do you think they're going to say? Right? Like, so do you think lying is okay? Like, 你知道吗？这些 question, of course, you cannot ask that. So I come up with ways of asking questions that really test their EQ. Right? You've heard EQ and IQ, right? IQ is fairly easy to test. You just ask them whatever technical questions you need. How do you do this? Write this line of code for me, right? What does this abbreviation mean? It's very binary in the answer. So it's either they know it or they don't know it. Explain to me X, Y, and Z. How does that work, right? So what I like to do is I like to ask questions that are very testing of their EQ. How do they get something done? What goes on in their mind, right? So for example, one of the questions I ask almost every time is I say, let's say you're working on a project and you have to enter data, and 6 months later, you just realized you've been entering data wrong for 6 months. So, and not a lot of people will say, well, the question is, what do you do? Right? I don't ask that. I say, what goes through your mind? Right? Because most people, when you say, what do you do? They know what to do. I could care less about that. I said, what goes through your mind? I asked that question on an interview on Monday, and the woman said, well, first I would probably, go into the closet and yell for about 20 seconds. And I'm like, understanding, right? And then she said, then I would call my manager and I would let him know where I made a mistake, because I made a mistake and I own it. Wow, right? I've also asked that question before, and somebody said, well, it depends on how easy is it for me to fix. That person, you have to be careful, because if they can get away with it, they will. You see what's going on there? So that's how you get to an answer. The other one is I like to test analytical skills, right? One of the questions I ask, I've been asking this question for like almost 20 years now. I say, you started let's say I hire you, and I ask you to go to that football field across the street. It's like a high school football field, and I want you to tell me how many blades of grass are growing there. So what do you do next? This one is, what do you do next, right? And then I also ask them, what do you think? And I want to know how they think, because depending on what that person's doing, what type of role that person's applying for, I want them to answer the question a different way. If that person is coming in and just doing technical work, I expect them to ask questions like, well, what's the size of the field, right? Stuff like that. I had one guy ask me, well, is it real grass or artificial grass? Very good question. Artificial grass has specific density per square meter. Much easier to calculate, huh? And then you're like, what type of grass is like, Georgia blue or California, whatever, right? And but then, if I'm hiring somebody that's maybe doing a project management job, right? They would ask things like, well, when do you want it done? What's my budget? Right? Well, how many resources do I have? And or somebody who's doing a highly analytical job is, well, how accurate do you need it to be? Right? And then of course, the one time this one guy actually gave me a method to exactly calculate it, and it turned out he was like some kind of a grass expert in a previous career. That was just like an anomaly. Okay, it was an anomaly. He was like, well, if it's this kind of grass, that's what the density is, and football fields are generally X, Y, and Z, and here's how you would calculate. Okay, I think there's this many blades of grass. And I'm like, okay, well, all right. But I ask questions like that. In fact, I have a spreadsheet that I have all these questions like listed on there, right? Besides technical questions, right? I ask them about if what if your boss asks you to do something you know nothing about? What do you do? Right? And so like I asked a woman earlier this week, I said, what if you came into this company and I asked you to go and negotiate with every hotel chain to lower our hotel rates, right? And so she's coming into a role that's highly analytical, and she gave me all these answers. But what I wanted to hear her say was, "Who's staying in a hotel? It's a pandemic, man." Right? I wanted to hear her say that, but she didn't. She went right into, well, how many hotels and all that stuff. And so that's very dangerous, right? Because somebody who's a strategic thinker, they don't jump to action like that. They start asking why and all the what and the how before they get into like how they're going to execute against it, right? And so these are the kind of questions I ask. The other thing I like to do, this is, I don't know how you think about it. Melody, I might be convinced to send that out at some point. Is I deliberately either show up late to the interview, or if it's like, let's say it's an hour long or 45 minutes long, I deliberately go over and see what happens. And in fact, I got that from who's that guy? The Oracle of Omaha. Geez, Warren Buffett. One of the things he does, he probably doesn't do that anymore, but he takes prospects to lunch, interviewers to lunch, but he shows up early. And he gives the wait staff, extra $100, and he says, whatever that person orders, I want you to bring them something different from what they order. And he watches their response, because where you really test people is when they don't get something that they expect. That's when their character comes out, right? If the person gets mad, if they're condescending to the waiter, like, what's wrong with you? I asked for, ham and ham and eggs, steak and eggs, and you give me like pancakes. Like, how could you get, like, right? Are they very demeaning? Do they talk down to that person? Are they understand? Or maybe they're just a pushover and they just, okay, fine, I'll just eat my pancakes, right? You find out a lot about that character. And so, nowadays, what I'm seeing more and more of are companies are ask you to take a personality test before you, as part of the pre-interview screening, right? If I don't know if any of you are in the sales business where you're doing sales, that's becoming increasingly popular because sales folks, like, you got to have strong mentality because people will tell you no all the time. They'll be rude to you all the time, and every day you got to start over. Richard's got a good comment there. I like that. And so one of the things that they want to test for salespeople is that you're resilient and that you just made a huge sale, and the next day you're back to zero, start over, right? And so there's more and more ways for them to do personality assessments and whatnot. But even then, if you meet a tricky interviewer, they won't ask you the standard, like, what do you want to be in 3 years, those kind of questions, right? They don't ask that. And so but anyway, hopefully that kind of helps, answers it. Right.
Hey, Cary.
Mm. Hey.
Liz here. Sorry I
Yeah.
joined late, but
Hey.
I'm not sure if this question was asked. So my question is, how do you know when to move on to next job, even though this job has a very high pay?
Well, the answer is that you should always be looking. You should
Okay.
always be. You should never be not looking. The best time to look for a job is when you don't have pressure to go find a job. Think about that, right? If you just got a notice from your company that you're going to be laid off next week, or maybe this Friday you went in happy and Friday afternoon you were fired. How is your outlook on looking for a job? Do you think you're going to make sacrifices in what you decide? Do you think that you might rush to judgment to decide something that maybe is not the right thing? Versus you're pretty happy at your job, things are kind of generally going well, and you've got your feelers out there, right? I go on interviews all the time. I have no intention of leaving, but I think of it as a way for me to, both network and practice, and frankly, it's a way for me to determine what I'm really worth, right? And so and so how do you decide when to leave? I think it has to also do with your personal situation, right? Like, one of the things I spoke about earlier is that it's okay to take risks, right? But it also, like, one of the things, like, if that same situation happened to me today, right now, with a wife and 2 kids, and I'm the single income, I wouldn't take that kind of risk. I don't think my wife would like it if I tell her we're gonna live on the beach. Yeah, she's not.
Maybe
She's
she
not here.
would.
She would. Yeah. But we're gonna live on the beach and maybe sleep in the car. And I got a few friends that live around LA. We can sleep on their couch, and the kids will be fine, right? So I think you got to think about where your life is, right? What your situation is, and in some cases where your family is, right? And and all of that. So I don't think there's a specific answer for anybody. I think I believe that when the right opportunity comes, I think God will make it more obvious to you. But I think God will also give you desires of your heart. So if your desire is to just get something that ultimately won't be good for you, I think you'll ultimately get it, right? I think you got to leave that door open for God to open the right door for you versus you try to kick that door open. And
Okay.
that's tough. I know it's not a straight answer, right? But it's
No, it's okay. It's a great answer, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is your company open any position right now?
They're it's interesting you said that. Our company has about 12,000 people. They're trying to hire something like 3,000 people this year, but HR is like molasses, like they like it's the problem is you can't hire enough people to go hire the people you need, right? It's that kind of situation,
I
right?
see.
And so they have tremendous amount of openings right now, like in LA and Irvine and San Antonio, all over the place. And so yeah, if you guys see anything, let me know. I wouldn't mind being a reference.
I actually checked out your website. It's under career section. I was very surprised. 他居然现在 hire 很多的人。Yeah.
很多 yeah
对
because
was kind of unexpected. 对我
yeah
来
our company actually last year during the pandemic had one of the best years in our 85-year history because all the people with money decided they want to invest it because the stock market was low, right? Buy low, sell high, right? So what happens when the market goes low? Everybody's buying. So now when the market's recovering, it's the company's doing really, really well. So yeah, they're hiring tremendously around all aspects. So and there's Irvine has a lot of really good companies too. There's this I think it's called the Irvine Business Journal. I think that's what it is, and it's a whole series of business journals. They have them like Bay Area Business Journal, Los Angeles Business Journal, like Seattle Business Journal, Puget Sound Business Journal, right? Silicon Valley Business Journal, and they do like this every year, top 100 company type rankings, and that their rating is actually, in my opinion, pretty honest. And so you can and they rate it on several different metrics, and so may think about that as well. But yeah, there's and you network, right? You network, you meet people, and that's how you find your next job, right? And like monster.com and LinkedIn isn't everything. If that's all you're doing, if you're trying to find a job, maybe that's okay if you're not like desperately trying to find a job, right? If you're casually looking, but if you're really trying to find a job and that's all you do, it's probably not even close to what you should be doing. So like when I left Fox and landed at Capital Group, I basically called my network. I called my network of vendors, my network of friends in Southern California, and I say, hey, I'm looking, and then immediately started getting calls. I don't think I even went to like, LinkedIn or whatever. So networking is important. And that's why you got to be looking before you need to look, right? Because if you wait until you're unemployed and then you start networking and going to networking events, you're probably too late, right?
Cary, 我有一个问题，就是you mentioned before that you currently are working on the CFA. So I just wondering, 你会想 pursue CFA, is it because it's like your job require you to do that, or just for self-improvement? 因为我也是 in the finance area.
Yeah.
And actually I passed CFA level 1 like 5 or 6 years ago. No, it's a long time ago, and now they're changed a lot of stuff. They keep updating the, 那些有的没的东东西西. I don't know 他们现在 update 到哪. So, and once I stop reading it, I don't want to go back again.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, like, is that for your self-improvement? You just want to improving yourself, or it kind of like, 就是公司也需要，然后 if 公司需要的话，my second question will be that what kind of skills you think is better for us to develop？ 你知道吗？因为 interview 的时候，我觉得有些 skills 就是 recruiter 他们会 prefer we have it，and 我觉得趁我们还有这个体力的时候，可以赶快去 get those skills.
Yeah. So for me, 因为我们的公司的 business is around financial services, right? And mutual funds and investment management. So you know, my job, I need to engage with investment professionals. And so, and I look at every one of their credentials, and they are all they're either CFAs or they have like their MBAs from Harvard, right? This company loves Ivy League, right? And so, you know, I look at it and I'm like, wow, that's something that, you know, I would really like to learn. And so what I'm doing is I actually spoke to several, I have a good friend who's on the Washington State CFA board. And so he actually told me, he said, you know, there's a good chance because of what you do, you wouldn't even be eligible for the certification if you pass the tests, right? The chartered financial analyst, they wouldn't even give it to you because you're not an investment professional. And so, so what I'm doing is I'm first working on my CFA foundations, right? And so, which is for non-investment professionals. And then if I pass that, then I'm going to talk to a few more people and see if we can figure out how to alter my job so that it becomes more investment leaning, and that would help as well. And frankly, what I'm doing outside of work, I feel like that would also benefit me. And also my company is awesome, right? They're willing to pay for me. Like I went through this executive program at UCLA at Anderson that took like an entire year. And the company basically said, you know what, just work 4 days a week. On the 5th day, focus on your homework. And,
Wow.
and they also paid for my tuition, the whole, like everything. And then, you know, and when I had to drive up to LA for classes, they're like, we'll pay for your gas. And like, if you need to stay overnight because the classes are long, we'll pay for your hotel. And so I'm like, hey, you know,
That's
learning. Why not, right? But it speaks to the core of what I think is important nowadays, right? Because, you know, it, of course it's important for you to have the hard skills to do the job, right? But I think there's increasingly more leaning on people who certainly have that technical skill, but also have those soft skills to be able to develop in their job, right? Because the job is going to be changing and evolving. So, for example, for me, I hire people based on how action oriented they are, right? And whether they're somebody that drives engagement. And then I also think about how does that person deal with something that's complex or something that's ambiguous, it's vague, or if that person just needs to adapt, how well can they adapt, right? And then I also think about how does that person work with others? Are they easy to work with, or are they just kind of very standoff, cold, right? I think about the person's interpersonal savvy, right? Or how do they deal with difficult people, difficult situations, right? What if there's conflict? How do they think about that? And then I think, in my opinion, the most important thing is self-awareness and, of course, humility. I think if somebody does not have self-awareness, I think it's almost impossible for no matter what field they're in to advance, right? If you think about even like if I say to you, name some of the greatest business leaders out there, right? Like who would you say? You say alive or dead, right? Like folks like Steve Jobs, right? Folks like Elon Musk, right? And so if you think about some of the greatest business leaders out there, right? And you think about, and most of them have written books, right? And then you think of and you go read their books and you look at the themes that transcends all of those people and how they think about it. And they, whether or not maybe publicly they may be very hard-nosed or aggressive, but privately they always want to have a tremendous amount of self-awareness. They always rely on people around them. One of the things I did when I was at Microsoft is I had to do what's called quarterly business reviews. And once a quarter, I had to go in a room, and there were 3 people in there. One was the CIO, the other person was Steve Ballmer, and the third person was Bill Gates. And I have 3 hours with them to explain to them what I'm doing in my business and where I'm planning to improve. And I remember before those meetings starts, you always want to get there half hour early, right? And I would go to those and I sit in this waiting room, And I don't know who that person was before me, but every quarter she comes out crying. And I just like, I remember the first time I saw that, I was just like, oh, it's hot in you. Like, I almost decided I just forget, I quit. and, and the point of that is like, well, those people are scary, right? And so, but the thing is, when I went in there and I presented what I needed to share with them, they're really smart people. The one question you don't want them to ask is the one question they all want to ask, right? But what they always tell me, what they always said is that what can we do to help you? What are we not doing? That's not that you need us to do more of, right? What should I do more of? What should I do less of? And I feel like, within that group of leaders, even though publicly they were just kind of big monsters of industry, but behind closed doors, they're kind of thinking like, hey, you know what? I'm not always right. So, I need you to tell me when I'm not, right? And so, so I think it's very important to have that self-awareness and humility. In fact, it was one of the reasons I wanted to. It was kind of one of the themes I wanted to share today, was around having that humility. And so I think, and it demonstrates itself in many ways, right? In terms of humility, in terms of knowing where you need to correct, and humility in terms of self-awareness, in terms of knowing when you've done something wrong and you just need to admit your fault. Humility in terms of knowing you're not the smartest person and maybe you need to learn more, right? How important is that in any organization, in any team, that you need to have some people that have those kind of soft skills? And that's one of the things that I feel like is important. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. There's this organization out there called Korn Ferry, KORNFERRY, and they're like a really top-notch executive recruiting firm, right? Like if you're trying to find like the next, I don't know, the next president of Coca-Cola, like that, they're probably kind of those kind of folks, right? And so they put out this this document called the Korn Ferry Competencies. And so it's basically got every competency that's not a hard skill, every soft skill competency mapped in there. And it explained to you, what does this competency mean? What does it mean when you have just exactly enough of it? What does it mean when you have too much of it? What does it mean when you don't have enough of it? And then if you have too much of it, here's how you can address it. If you don't have enough of it, here's how you can address it. And that book has been like almost like a second Bible to me. Where is it? It's over. Yeah. And there's online PDF versions that you can just download for free, by the way. So but it's a really good way to think about it, to break down how you look at your competencies, right? And of course, depending on the job, the competencies you need to have are vary, right? Of course, right? If you're going to be in a leadership position, or if you're an individual contributor, if you're doing analytical work, or if you're doing repetitive work, whatever that is, right? You need different types of skill sets, but it captures everything together. And of course, depending on what role you're looking at, there may be different competencies that are more important than not. And in fact, one area that it talks about specifically is what causes you to stall in your career, right? Like what it's called career stallers, right? And so it talks about what behaviors will always stall your career. And so it's not a book to be read, it's a reference document, but that section is really fascinating. Because like I remember reading through there and going, oh, I totally do that. Oh, I do that too. It's like, oh my gosh, I got so much to work on. So is this helpful for you guys? Like you guys hopefully getting some insight on
Yeah, very
okay.
helpful.
Yeah,
Well, what did you say it was? Corn competency?
Here, I'll type it out just to
Okay.
Korn Ferry.
Korn Ferry.
Yeah. So hold on a second here. I'm not on my VPN, so oh shoot, the link is at work. Darn it. competencies. I think if you Google that with like
Yeah, we can.
PDF, it's in there. It's in there. It's buried in there, but it's in there. And yeah, these guys are kind of the like they do a lot of theory around leadership, right? And people human development, but they also like are ultimately their recruiting company. So
Like, do you fill out surveys or like?
it's not a survey. It's not a survey. It's basically here. You know what? Shoot, let me just show you guys. Hold on. Hey, I've got Zoom, right? Um, I have the version that's through work. Okay, so hold on a second here. How do I share my screen? Hold on. Got too many windows. Hold on. Window 1. I want to share window 2. Good. Okay, so let me know when you guys can see something. Can you see Korn Ferry competencies, right? It's only 448 pages. So
Wow.
but if you look in here, it's got all the competencies in here.
Hey,
Accountability.
Gary, I think you're sharing.
Oh, I'm sharing the wrong screen. Oh, okay. Here, I'll do this then. Sorry. Got my screen 1 and 2 reversed. So zoom in. Can you guys see better?
Yeah.
So this is the book. It's called Korn Ferry FYI Competencies. And it's basically what do you call 30 competencies that fits into their framework. And so, for example, remember I was talking to you guys about somebody that is, let's say collaborates, right? So if I click on collaborates, it's a PDF with hyperlinks, so it'll take you around. So it talks to you about what does it mean to collaborate. It talks to you about what does it mean when you're skilled with it, meaning you're a good collaborator, right? It also, what does it mean when you're not skilled enough? And what does it mean when you're like really good at it? And what does it mean when you just use it too much? Right. And they write it in what I think are pretty simple words that you could look at and say, oh, that's me. And then it just keeps going. It goes into what are some causes, what are some things, how you should think about it in your head if you want to work on it. Right. And then it gives you all these tips that tells you what to do and what you could think about, how you should think about it. And if you really, really, really like, want to learn more, they even give you all these books you can go read. So, and they have that for all of that's why it's like, 450 pages. And that's what the Korn Ferry competencies is. So you can find this. This is our work version, but I have the link on my personal laptop, so I can shoot it out to you guys later if it helps. So it's great. It's it's very helpful in my career. So, okay. Where to go?
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think my question is, I think I speak for a lot of people that we're in this job that we don't really like and that we just put up with, but we have experience in this field, and it's like taking a lot of risk to switch careers at this point in our life. So it's like, and then so it's just like we just continue to work in this job that we don't really like, but too afraid to take that risk.
Yeah. So it may be because of your life situation or whatever other situation that you can't take that risk, right? There's a gentleman that he used to mentor me when I was younger, and his name is Bill. And Bill used to say to me, the day you decide you don't like your job, from the next day going forward, you have no reason to complain because you choose to be there. Right? Nobody's putting a gun to your head, forcing you to go to work. Because, yeah, of course, if you don't go to work, you might lose, you might not have income, you might not have health care, and there's all sorts of consequences, right? But still, it's a decision you choose, right? And so that's one of the things that it's very insightful when you think about it in that way, because it's quite empowering in that, you know what, you have your choice, right? You choose to get up in the morning, go to work, and the company says, because you know Cary chooses to do that, I'm going to give you a check every couple of weeks, right? And so how do you break out of that cycle, right? And so I don't think it's the same answer for everybody. I think it just kind of depends on your situation, right? And I think you have to. I believe that, you know, you need to try to find joy where you are, and if you've really gone after seeking it and it's not working out, I think all of that helps you toward making your decision, because ultimately it's your own decision. You could say, I could say, you know what, I'm I'm not gonna rent an apartment. I'm just gonna live in my car, and that's a decision I've made. And because of that, I don't need a job, right? You guys ever like see YouTube videos of people that live in like the back of a van, right? And so you think to yourself, oh my gosh, how do you like do X, Y, and Z? How do you, you know, but they choose to do that, right? And because they choose to live in a more frugal fashion, they don't need a big high paying job. Maybe they don't even need a job. They can just live off their savings, right? And so it's a personal choice. Now, it's also very how do I say this? It's also very it's great to say it. It's hard to do it, because the bottom line is, you know, Monday morning is a few days away, and most of you guys probably got to go up and go to work or go to school or whatever it is. You still got to do it, right? And so to me, you know, it goes back to what's your center, what's your compass, right? And so to me, it goes back to, sure, you know, if you derive your self-worth, if you derive your happiness from a job, then you're always at some point going to be disappointed, right? And like the Bible says, you know, put your trust in what? In man. I hope you guys are saying no, right? The Bible says put your trust in God. Why? Because man and woman, right? Although apparently not as many women, more men, right? That's what my wife will say. But but man will always fail you. Man is sinful, right? And so in the same way, you think about job. If you put your happiness in a job, at some point you're gonna get disappointed. Maybe you're super happy today, but Monday just a few hours away, right? And so you got to think about job as something you do to earn money, and if you can be happy, if you can, you know, be grateful for it, right? Like one of the things that, and I gotta tell you, even though I love the company on that, there's, you know, we've gone through reorgs and things like that, and I find myself thinking, what am I doing here, right? And you know what I think to myself when that happens? I think about that old beat up SUV that I used to sleep in the back. And one day I was sleeping in a parking lot up in Reseda, up in the Simi Valley area. And I hear a knock on the window,
That's
and I
scary.
and it was like 6 in the morning, and I look out, and I was like, there's nobody there. And then I went, and I'm kind of, I'm awake, right? And then I put my head back down and I hear again. And I'm like, who is that? I get up and I look around and I see the top of a head. You know who it was? It was Gary Coleman. You know who Gary Coleman is?
Oh, the
What you talking
short
about?
one.
What you talking
Yeah,
about, Willis? Right?
Lewis.
He was a security guard.
Oh my
But whenever I think about leaving a job, I think about, man, sleeping in the back of that car. Oh, just glad California is warm and not cold, you know. But I think about that, and all of a sudden I'm really grateful that I have a job, right? And I can't imagine that something like that happened to my family, right? It's one thing happened to me, but happened to my family. Wow, that's like terrible, right? And so for me, I don't have to go very far to feel grateful for what I have. That's what I'm trying to say, right? And so think about it in that way. You know, it really puts things in perspective. Yeah.
I have a question. So
it's probably very general, but just wanted to see what's your thought. How do you motivate your team members to perform better to become the next level? What's your experience?
Oh, that's a tough one, right? So, um, you know, there are people that are what you call stay and be great. You heard that. There are people that just want to do their job well and they want to earn their paycheck and they may be just there. Some people look at those and say, well, these are clock watchers. You ever heard of that? 5 o'clock, gotta go. 4:59, I'm packing up my bag, turning off my laptop. I don't care what it is, right? I think that's kind of a negative view of that person because I think the world needs people that are stay and be great people, right? Imagine if you have let's say you have a team of 10 people. Every one of them is like super ambitious, wants to get to the next level, wants to do everything. You might have a different problem on your hands. It'd be good if you had a few people that are stay and be great, right? There's this tool that that we use in leadership. It's called 9box. I don't know if any of you ever heard of that concept before, right? And so it's oh, I love the internet, right? And so you could just go Google 9box. Yep, 9box. And 9boxing is a way to rate people, and it basically measures people on potential and performance, two axes, right? Performance and potential. And obviously somebody who is low potential and low performance, you're probably should be doing what I call managing that person out, right? If that person is on the other end of the spectrum, high performance, high potential, that's the person you want to focus on because that's your next leader, right? And then there's each box has different ways of thinking about it. Like I'll give you a really interesting story. There's a very interesting video on the internet that is where they interviewed a Navy SEAL, right? And they interviewed he's one of the top recruiters for Navy SEAL, right? He determines who they want to put in the SEAL Team 6, right? These are the guys that went and killed Osama bin Laden and whatnot, right? So they asked him, if you look at a 9box, do you want a high performing soldier or do you want a soldier with potential? What do you guys think what do you think a typical Navy SEAL that you would want to go out and take out some of the world's worst terrorists? What do you think that they would want? Obviously, you'd want ideally both.
Yeah.
Right? You think that,
Yeah.
right? Well, he actually said, of course I want both. But given the choice, if I could only have one or another, I'd rather have somebody who has high potential than performance. Right. And the reason he said that is that because who do you think you want sitting next to you or watching your back if you're in battle? Do you want the person that has over their training and mentally or have a tremendous amount of potential and mental strength? Or do you want somebody that maybe just only can shoot but have no mental capacity at all, right? And so so it's called 9boxing. I'm Googling it right now. There's like a ton of variations of that, but it's a way to rate talent. And one thing I'll say is you never share that with the talent because you never share that with people because unless they really understand the science behind it, it can feel very insulting. Because the truth is, being in that top left here, I'll do this here. I'll share with you. Let me find a nice picture of one. How about that? This might be okay. Here we go. Here's an interesting 9box, right? It's like this is kind of cool. You can share stuff. Share screen 1. No, screen 2. Here we go. So like obviously if somebody is in the top right, you guys can see this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So obviously if somebody's in the top right hand superstar, that's great, right? But the problem is, what do you think if you were in that role? You're constantly thinking, hey, where's my promotion? Remember we talked about that earlier, right? And so that person might not be your best superstar. What I would say is somebody that's a one to watch or exceeds all. That's where you want your people at. You don't want everybody. You like I was saying earlier. You don't want a whole team full of consistent superstars. It'll be a disaster. Because when you need work to just sometimes you just need work to get done. Nobody want to do it because they're all thinking about I want to be strategic, right? And so what you really want is you want somebody that's a one to watch or somebody that's an exceeds all expectations, right? The yellow indicates people that are there's possibility there, right? There's possibility to pull them into the green. The red, really think about it. And somebody that's in the bottom left probably should be managing them out. Managing them out is a nice way of saying that you're giving the person an opportunity to leave gracefully versus something harsh, right? And so this is called nine boxing. Have any of you heard of this or seen it in concept? Really?
No.
Oh, okay, that's odd. Okay, I've been doing this for decades. But this is called a nine box. If you Google it, there's just like a ton of variations of this, right? And but there's also like a ton of hold on a sec. How do I get rid of this? Okay. So there's also a bunch of there's a lot of science behind all of this, right? But if you want to look at how you develop your team and build them, you trying to do it all at once is probably not the right way to do it. What you want to do is you want to think about who are the people that you have that are in the green, and you want them to work with you together. Remember I was talking about know who you're working with, right? Right? So find somebody to work with you to motivate the team. If you're the only person, if you find yourself to be the only person motivating your team, probably not doing something right. Find somebody to partner with you, even if it's another person on the team, to somebody that maybe is somebody that is a higher performer, and have that person work with you to motivate the team. And it will create momentum. But then also realize there are people that are ultimately just kind of call them toxic, or just they just may not, maybe they just have like somebody made a bad decision at some point and brought them in, right? There's just people like that. There's nothing you can do about it at that point. So does that answer your question a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, nine boxes. I do this probably twice a year for everybody on my team and the management group. We get together and we discuss it and we debate it, and this is in fact how we develop that person. Right. If somebody's in the yellow area, what do you the way we help that person develop is different from somebody that's in the green area. Right. So it's how what it's a management leadership tool to help you think about talent. There's even, I would even say there's controversy behind it, right? Because you put people in boxes, right? That in itself is kind of, some folks, there's some controversy in terms of thinking about that, right? But I think that it's a good way to we're not trying to like box people, but we're actually using this as a way to figure out what's the best way to help that person. Right. When I did this at Microsoft, they were like, the red, give them warning and get rid of them in 6 months. Rinse and repeat. That was kind of the MO back then. So, okay. Any other questions or nine box? Yeah. Yeah, Richard, that was a good comment. Right. You need to have A and B workers every company. Yeah. Otherwise, in fact, when my initial team that I built at Capital Group, it was full of A people, and it was so difficult to even just communicate something because everybody had an opinion and they've all done it a different way and why their way is better. And so it's really tough to make any sort of decisions if and so we eventually fleshed out the team, got some a good mix of people in there, and it created better balance. Yeah. What do you guys think about the recent trends around working remotely, like permanently, right? Permanent remote, no office, nothing. Do you guys prefer that or don't like it?
Think it's a good option. Like before, I never would have thought I would enjoy working from home because I like, you know, seeing my coworkers and interacting with them in person. But now it's like I just feel like it's more flexible. Like when you work from home, you can, you know, your time is more flexible and you can certain things is like better to do in the office when everyone is in the office, but then there's also advantages of working from home. So
Yeah.
I think it's great to have that option for more jobs to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I haven't worn pants for like a year. Like
Ah.
I've been wearing shorts for like a whole year.
Mm.
I'm kind of scared going back to work. I hope they all fit.
Mine don't fit. I had to buy all new pants.
Yeah. It certainly opens up opportunities to not be geographically tied to a
Yeah.
location,
Exactly.
you know? And so I don't know, like, you know, like don't have to be in California. You could be anywhere if you could be like my friend, they went up to Alaska, you know, so be anywhere.
Mhm.